I'm like, you know how much people watch?
Hello, everybody.
Hey there.
Welcome this evening. We have a very modest crowd for, hey, who owns Tetris? A sordid history. Let's begin with an introduction. Hi, everyone. I'm Tygan. Works better when it's not so crooked and I don't have to crouch. And I like video games a lot. In particular, Tetris. It's one of the most popular games in the world. Could I get a show of hands of just who of the 7 people in this room have played it? Okay, just about everyone. That makes a lot of sense because it's sold over 500 million copies since 1985, and there are approximately over 200 official versions released. Versions such as Tetris, Magical Tetris Challenge, Tetris Terror Instinct, Tetris with Cardcaptor Sakura, and Faces, Tris 3. Now, with all these different versions, you might be asking, why do all these exist? I mean, there's really nothing else like it. It's one series with so many different versions released seemingly officially by all these different studios and publishers and all that. So, who actually owns Tetris 3? This was a real version. This is official. Now, the answer to that question looks a little something like this. We have to go back in time to answer this. Back all the way to this man, Alexei Pajitnov. He was born in Russia to an art critic and an entertainment journalist who both engendered a love of creativity and a passion for the arts, but he really excelled in mathematics and sciences. By the late 70s, he was a researcher at the Computer Center for the Soviet Academy of Sciences, and in his free time, he frequently developed little puzzle games on this machine, the Electronica 60, Soviet computer. Around 1984, he was starting up another one of these projects where he was creating another game that he remembered from his childhood. Specifically, this one played with pentominoes, these little 5-unit shapes. You might have played this before. It's the kind of game where you take all these shapes and then slot them into an area of a certain size, but with a little bit of a digital twist. What if instead the pieces were randomized, something you couldn't do physically? So he started on the game, and he first ran into a couple of issues. Number one is that pentominoes were too complex. The shapes that they made were too messy, they were kind of awkward to work with, so he moved on to tetrominoes, 4-unit shapes, which were just simple enough that you could kind of make workable patterns and shapes with them, but not create that really messy effect that you get with pentominoes. And thus, Tetris is born. He came up with the idea to have, once you got good enough at the game, the lines would just fill up, and he realized that the game would be over, so he came up with the mechanic of the lines clearing once you fill them up. Tetris, this is actually what the original version of Tetris looked like, running on an Electronica 60. The name Tetris itself actually comes from a weird portmanteau of the words tetras and tetramino and tennis, which just happened to be his favorite game at the time. It really has no relation to the game to Tetris itself. So, Tetris immediately is so successful. It's a total hit at his own academy. He gives it to his friend who studies at a local medical institution, and it is so popular there that it has to be banned, which means there's a real possibility that someone in Russia had a botched heart surgery because their doctor couldn't stop playing Tetris in class. So with all of this runaway success, he starts to think, maybe I should do something with this. This might have potential. But there's a couple of problems with that. Number one, he lives in the Soviet Union. He is not a businessman. The Soviet Union didn't let people own intellectual property. And what's more, as a researcher, he couldn't actually sell his creation. Everything was basically owned by the state. But there might be a way around it. Just give it to the Academy. They are an institution, they're not an individual, maybe they can manage it. So, in 1986, he made a deal with his supervisor, a man named Victor Birablin, I think is the most accurate way to say it, who is a higher up at the Academy. Birablin sells it to a company called Novotrade, sells the rights to a company called Novotrade, who began distributing it throughout Hungary and Poland. Sorry, Slovakia. Enter Robert Stein. He is a salesman from London, and while he was touring around Europe, he found Tetris at a trade show in Hungary, and he knew that it was immediately a success and he wanted it. But there's one problem. Who actually owns it? Like some Soviet guy? It's like an academy or something. Where are the rights to this thing? It's weird. It doesn't work like anywhere else in the world. So he contacts the Academy. He has no luck getting through to them. Then he finds the only two people whose names are kind of connected to the project, Paginov and Birablin. And he decides to send them a fax saying, hey, what if we could work out a deal of some sort? And they say, yeah, actually, we might be interested in that. That's all they say. And with that, he takes that fax and says, I own Tetris. It's mine. I own all the rights to it. Don't ask about it. I have a contract. So he instantly sells it to two companies, Mirrorsoft for the European distribution, and Spectrum Holobyte for the American distribution. Now, Tetris, just like it was in its first kind of wave of being licensed, is a huge success in the US and Europe. This is only the computer versions that were initially released for home computers. And it's selling like millions of copies, which is quite a bit for soccer in those days. And he's thinking, maybe I should probably actually own this? One problem, as usual. Again, everything is owned by the state, specifically in Soviet Russia, an institution called Elektronik Technica, aka ELORG. So he talks to Paginov, he kind of like dances around what he did. He's like, hey, who might I maybe talk to if I wanted to get the license of Tetris? And Paginov says, oh, probably ELORG. So Stein sends fax to ELORG. He offers 75% of the revenue. ELORG says we want 80. Ooh. Time to go to Russia. So in 1988, he goes to Russia. He sweats it out in negotiations with Soviet, not politicians, but government officials. And he ends up securing a 10-year contract for the rights to distribute Tetris across any and all computer systems. This verbiage is very important for the future. And mind you, this whole time, Paginov isn't even aware that his game is being sold outside of Russia. Okay, so I know it might have been a long day for some of you, but you're gonna have to focus up with me because we've gotten to the chart. So, as I just said, Stein sold the European rights to Mirrorsoft and the American rights to Spectrum Holobyte. So both of these companies want to expand into Japan. Mirrorsoft sells the Japanese rights to Tetris to Tengen, which is a subsidiary of Atari. Spectrum Holobyte sells it to a company called Bulletproof Software. Then, Tengen sells the arcade rights to Sega and the computer rights to Bulletproof Software. Again, they got it twice somehow. So, come 1989, Nintendo is launching the Game Boy. They want Tetris. It's this perfect pocket-sized puzzle game. It would be great. It would be great for the handheld. It's enjoyable by all ages. And enter Hank Rogers of Bulletproof Software, who, as I just mentioned, got the license twice. He has an existing relationship with Hiroshi Yamauchi, who is the president of Nintendo at the time, and they have a relationship which means that he gets secret knowledge of the Game Boy. And Yamauchi says, you guys own Tetris, right? And he goes, yeah, we own Tetris. Who doesn't own Tetris at this point? And would you want to do the handheld version of Tetris? And that's he also sees dollar signs. So the only thing left is to figure out where the handheld rights are. Remember that these are all separate sectors. You need to secure different rights for every different type of hardware that it's running. Arcade, home computer, console cartridge, and handheld. And this time there had never been a handheld version. So where do we get them? Well, he goes back to Atari, who sold him the rights the second time. And Atari is, for some reason, not interested in it. So, okay, why don't I go up the ladder, and I'm going to go to Stein. Now, Stein is interested in selling him the rights, but he's got to consult with Elord. He might as well make use of that contract, right? After about 2 weeks of zero contact with Stein, Rogers starts to get a little antsy. He starts to get a little worried that he's getting iced out of the deal. Around like 3 weeks, he gets really nervous and gets really scared, and he decides the only thing left to do is go to Russia. So, Rogers lands in Russia, and he gets to Elord, and he's waiting in the lobby of the Elord building. And he looks across the lobby, and who does he see? But Stein, sitting there, right across from him. They got there the same day, the same time. And Stein isn't alone. He's actually there with a man named Kevin Maxwell, who is the CEO of Mirrorsoft. Now Rogers' worst fears are coming true. He was going to get iced out of the deal by Stein. Stein was going to take the advanced knowledge he had of the Game Boy and the handheld rights, and he was going to instead get a deal with his boy, Maxwell. Maxwell you might know as being the son of infamous criminal businessman Robert Maxwell, and brother to Ghislaine Maxwell. I'm not kidding. That means there's only 4 or 5 degrees of separation between Tetris and the president. I wrote that joke before the emails came out. Okay, so this is a ridiculous situation. Everyone's like, why are you here? Total coincidence. They all happen to be there on the same day at the same time, and they decide the only thing really to do is head into this conference with the head of Elord, Nikolai Belikov. It's a creepy picture of him. I gotta give this one to you. Okay, so now it's high stakes negotiation time. We're not playing around. Rogers asks for the handheld rights to Tetris. Belikov says, yeah, that should be fine. That's, yeah, it's actually cool. He really didn't care that much. He's just, yeah, he's a government employee. He doesn't really have a business interest in this. So I imagine with the weight of the world off of his shoulders, Rogers says, oh, cool. You should check out what it'll look like. And he produces an NES copy of Atari Tetris. And Belikov says, I thought I only gave out the computer rights. Oh no! Uh-oh. Alright, so total pandemonium breaks out. Stein and Maxwell both claim that Nintendo has been illegally reproducing the game, trying to cover themselves. Rogers is like, whoa, no, this is not illegal reproduction. I'll clear things up. This is officially made by Atari. And Belikov says, what's Atari? And when were they involved? Oh no! So over the next few minutes, which I can't imagine were very fun, this entire house of cards, built on sand, comes crashing down. Every single lie that Stein has told up to this point is basically forced out, and eventually they decide that the simplest thing to do, sorry, I had Denny's nachos like 3 hours ago. would be to get all of the rights under one, all the relevant rights under one company. So now, it's basically Mirrorsoft versus Bulletproof Software. And at this point, Rogers is kind of negotiating on the back foot. It is a 2 versus 1 situation. So, yeah, that's all good. Yep. Something kind of beautiful happens. So, during this time, Alexei Pajitnov himself was invited to these negotiations. He was the creator of the game, after all. And at first, the first time that Pajitnov met Rogers, he actually was kind of wary of him. He basically, from what he understood, Rogers was like this con artist who was representing Tetris outside of Russia without his knowledge and trying to make money off of it. And he's pretty icy towards him. And Rogers is trying to make a good first impression. And in their discussion, Rogers mentions that he had actually produced a game himself. He had made a game himself. And Pajitnov realized that he had never actually met another game designer. And something actually kind of changed in his heart, and he started warming up to him. They then bonded over their shared love of the game of Go, and realized that they actually got along pretty well. Now, you have to understand that at this time in the Soviet Union, this is pretty dangerous behavior, because they're not just discussing this in meetings with Belikov and Stein and Maxwell. They're actually going outside of government property to have these discussions. And in Soviet Russia, this is Rogers on the right, Rogers on the right, Pajitnov on the left. Rogers is here on a tourist visa, or a visitor's visa, which means that he's actually not even allowed to talk to non-government officials. He can't talk to regular citizens. And any Russian citizen, like Pajitnov, who's talking to some foreign businessman is actually really suspicious. They are both risking quite a bit. Rogers at least has a little bit of, he's a foreign national, which means that if he gets thrown in the gulag, which was a genuine thing that could happen, he does have another country that can kind of argue on his behalf, and he can get a little bit, there's some outside force that can come pluck him up. Pajitnov is entirely beholden to the whims of the Soviet government, and he's trying to support his family. He had a son and a wife, and he's not like the richest guy living in Moscow. So he's kind of risking life and limb just to have these discussions, but he decides that it's worth it because he wants Tetris to be played by as many people as possible. And if it's going to happen, he wants it to be Rogers who gets the rights. So now we come back to the negotiations, and it is now a 2v2. You have Stein, the guy who's been lying to Belikov this whole time, and Maxwell, son of Robert Maxwell. And on the other side you have Hank Rogers and Pajitnov, the literal creator of the game, who is the only actually Russian person in this whole conversation besides Belikov. And what result do they come to? It's decided that the rights to Tetris will be given to, not Bulletproof, but actually Nintendo for manufacturing reasons. It was the simplest way to work it out. Rogers already had an existing relationship with Nintendo, and Rogers would actually make the deal and represent Pajitnov outside of the USSR. So now, we've kind of turned a new leaf. And Stein is kind of breathing a sigh of relief. He sort of got out of this relatively scot-free. You know, he didn't get in any big trouble. And this new contract comes across his desk, which he figures is just, he was assured that he would be kept within the, like he was still going to be involved. And this new contract comes out, and he figures that this is just something to get everyone on the same page. It's just a formality, so he just kind of signs away. And he doesn't read the very specific verbiage of the contract, which gives him the rights to all computer versions of Tetris. And the contract defines a computer as any machine, or a machine, with a screen and a keyboard, which a Game Boy doesn't have. So it's way too late by the time he realizes this, and he has essentially been totally cut off. There are no future versions of PC ports of Tetris that have been confirmed. So, hey, the Game Boy version of Tetris comes out. It's going to do great. Everyone, it seems like everyone kind of made it out. Everything came together at the end, and all's well that ends well. Except for one thing. Atari doesn't know. No one told them. It is only a month later, and they are still producing copies of NES Tetris. So, Atari, which, remember, is 10-bit. Go to Mirrorsoft, who sold them the rights, and they're like, hey, we got a cease and desist from Nintendo over Tetris, which nowadays is commonplace. But back then, it was like, don't we own Tetris? And by the time he hears this, Maxwell is like already out of the building. He is sending a personal fax to Mikhail Gorbachev, the leader of the Soviet Union, urging him to cancel the deal between Elorg and Nintendo. This does not work. Gorbachev really doesn't care about a little piece of software. He thinks that this whole thing is, he probably assumes it's very silly. And, hey, all's well that ends well, right? Except not really. Atari decides to go for one last stand in, I believe, June 1989. I think that's what my speaker said, but I don't have them in front of me. They are going to challenge Nintendo on the steps of the San Francisco court. And what is their argument? That they actually deserve the rights to Tetris. So Stein only has the computer rights, but the NES is a computer. And how do we know that?
Famicom.
The Japanese name is the Famicom, which means family computer. I rest my case. It turns out that actually does not satisfy the judge at all, so they're like, okay, actually wake my case up. My case is not rested. You can plug it into a computer, which makes it a computer. I rest my case. That, especially does not work. It doesn't work so badly that the judge rules that Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte never had the console rights to Tetris, or any legitimate rights to it at all. Nintendo becomes the sole owner of the console rights, and you guys remember how Sega was somewhere in this? They had been, screw it, they had the arcade license, but screw it, right? They were making a Genesis version of Tetris for their own console. This decision comes out and they're like, wait, no one owns Tetris? What? So they have to literally pull Genesis Tetris off of the assembly line. There's only about 10 copies of this that were ever produced, making it one of the rarest games in existence. So, in the aftermath of all of this, Pajitnov decided to travel internationally. He first stopped along the US, where he was dazzled by our sights and our people and our technology, culture. His favorite food was KFC. And seeing the great success that Tetris had and how internationally beloved it was, he called it an electronic ambassador of benevolence. Now, come 1996, it's been a couple years, the Soviet Union has fallen, they have dissolved. Rogers and Pajitnov approached Belikov, they have a proposal. So Elorg still exists, and Belikov is still ahead of it, but it's now a private company that just still has all the rights to everything that they had before. They asked for a 50% stake in Tetris in exchange for management of the brand, and thus, the Tetris company is formed. So, any version of Tetris that was released after 1996 is essentially licensed by the Tetris company to whatever other company wants to call Tetris that they agree to. And now, finally, 12 years after creating probably one of the best games ever made, Pajitnov was finally collecting royalties. They are still friends to this day, Rogers and Pajitnov. This is them on the left in the, I want to say, late 80s, early 90s. This is them around 2018. And Pajitnov always had a really good, he made other games over the course of his life, none of which were nearly as successful as Tetris, but he never really bothered. They never really bothered him. He kept a positive attitude about it. He said, the fact that so many people enjoy my game is enough for me. The end. If you enjoyed this panel, this is actually, I am by trade a YouTuber. I make videos on the history of video games and video game topics related to video game history, as well as like art analysis of stuff like that. So my channel is called The Seller, Type in Moon. This panel is actually sort of a panelized version of a video I did a couple of years ago of around the same name called Hey, Who Owns Tetris? I don't know what my videos. That's my other social media. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's 8. Oh, wow. That's doing pretty well. I don't know if we have to like evacuate immediately. But if anyone, did anyone have any questions at all? Yeah?
When did you create, I guess, your video or story about Tetris relative to the movie that came out? Just curious.
It was
like
before the movie came out.
Right.
I believe the movie was 2022. 23? Oh, the video's from, I believe, 21. The movie is...
You're talking about the one-star internal.
The one that, yeah.
Okay.
The movie is,
It's very traumatized, for sure.
it's dramatized. There was definitely like an element. Obviously, like I touched on a little bit of like the they weren't having like a car chase.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I got the general thing. I kind of wish the movie delved a little bit more into like the wacky negotiations, because that's the most interesting part of me, is this huge like spaghetti mess of rights. There was a book called Tetris Effect, which goes into a lot of this history as well. A citation for this presentation. So if you want a little bit more of like the more accurate story of backstory of Tetris, it's interesting to you.
Mario! The Mario Bros! We're the Mario Bros! And Plants a game. We're not like all the others who get all the fame. When you think it's in double,
Any other questions? All right, cool. And can I get a round of applause for my ladies? All right, thank you guys so much for coming out. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, good stuff.